Okay, now let's talk about traditional halibut fishing. Just kind of a map of the Salish Sea and outer coast. Talk a bit about macaw, and then another example that's haida. The broad methods are pretty common from here all the way up through southeast, meaning like the design of the hook and the way that was fished is pretty shared. So it's kind of interesting shared technology. I'm going to jump over to two videos and play those, and then we can talk a bit about it. So let's see. I'm going to pause and come back, see if this works. Okay, let's give this a try.
Partaking of what the ocean gives us, and the health of the ocean is one of the most important things there is to all of us. We've done it our whole lives from generation to generation. One of the enjoyments of the world is one, being with your family, and the other is having good food to eat. I mean, the whole family gets to enjoy it. We take active part in the fishery, and it's a way of life. It's important that it stays healthy. That's the most important thing. If you caught a fish, you were happy. There's nothing like a good fresh halibut. This is an early circle hook is what this is. And how they came up with an idea is beyond me, but I'm sure glad they did. Generally, they were very elaborately carved. They were used all up and down the northwest coast. This is a bone barb in this case, which would have been traditional, you know. That determines the size of your halibut. That's a 20-40. I'm talking about 20 pounds to 40 pounds. This is the way it would sit in the water. You tied the bait right here. This goes down to the big rock, and it just sits there. Your continuous line comes up to the surface, and you'll have a buoy up there. They're an eating machine. They're not going along and turning their nose up. Their whole purpose is to eat. Halibut, when he comes up, he actually comes up like this and goes in. And then he naturally puts the pressure on it and starts pulling it away. When that happens, he'll start towing it. And then I'll be up behind a log up on the beach watching with my binoculars, with my hobo coffee going in a can. And as soon as I see my fin come up, I'm going to race out there with my 6-horse to retrieve him. They've probably been doing this for centuries. All of the wonderful food that comes from the ocean. This is one thing that works year-round. When your salmon are gone, you can go out and get a halibut.
Okay, so that's a bit from haida. Now we're going to look at a macaw example of creating a hook using a little bit of a different style, a little bit of a different technology. So kind of a mix of tradish and modern materials. So rather than using cedar, here we're using some brass or some metal.
To be making some traditional macaw fishing gear today. This is called a Halibut. The design of this hook is very old. It's thousands of years old, and it's used widely up and down the coast of North America for fishing. We're going to test this hook out in our fishery to see if it's better at catching halibut and lingcod and not as many yellow eye and canary rockfish, which are endangered right now. So I'll hold this up close so you can get a better look at it. I'm going to be starting out with some 1/4-inch brass rod. The first hooks, some of the first hooks that were made by the macaw out of metal. Traditionally they were yew and spruce root, but the government had sent out some pitchforks because they wanted to make farmers out of the macaw, but the salty air and the rocky soil didn't take too well to farming, and so the pitchforks were turned into fish hooks. So here we go. The first thing I'm going to do is thin the hook so it matches the size of this other hook here. And I don't have a grinder, so I'm just going to use a Makita. 11 inches long. This one's cut about 12. The next step is I matched the two up pretty well. This barb is soldered in right here, and there's actually a steel. This is brass, and the barb is made out of steel. So I'm going to have to either sharpen a nail. Looks like this is probably a nail that was sharpened. And if you look, it's flat on one side, and it has the edge comes in right there. So I'm going to try to replicate that. You need to make it look like this. So here's one that's not finished. You can see how the older one here, this is a regular fish hook, and then the lead here was just gooped around there, and that's what holds it on. The remake that I made took me a while to figure out how to do the windings on it, but looks like it would work. Maybe we'll go try this thing out next. Well, I just got done drilling a hole in the Chibut right here, and it's about a 5/64 drill bit, what I used to go through there.
Okay, that was a bit about like one example, the cedar example, and then a modern metal example. And the story you told about macaw, I think, is hilarious in that you hear it all the time. The government gave macaw pitchforks to make us farmers, and we cut the tines off and turned them into halibut hooks because we're fishermen. I love that story, and I've heard it 100 times. I think it's great. So those are two examples, and we'll get a little bit more in depth about the Chibut and how it's used in some modern fisheries management. There's also this book by Hilary Stewart, Indian Fishing Early Methods of the Northwest, and that includes a whole lot of other technologies as well. It's a great picture book. Well, I just saw it. I have one somewhere. I don't know where it's at. But I have a copy. It's a great one to see some diagrams as well. And this is cool because this is a relationship to kelp as well. So here's Neurocystis bull kelp, where if you want to do a bentwood hook, you need to steam it. And kelp is like perfect little vessels for it, where they're hollow on the inside. You can shape your wood, put it in the kelp, put that in the fire, and it'll steam it, and then take it out and put it in either a mold or a jig of some sort. This is one thing I've always wanted to do. There's been some workshops on how to make halibut hooks. I've always wanted to learn how to do it. I think it'd be a really cool thing to learn and test and actually go out and fish with one. One of my former students at Northwest Indian College made one. And she did the whole process herself, down from this pin here. Is traditionally the front leg bone of a deer or an antler. There's some debate back and forth, likely either. The front leg bones of deer, though, are stronger because they take the impact. So you can take a splinter of deer bone here and then do your bent hook. And she was a commercial halibut fisher and had used it as well. Hadn't caught anything on it last I checked with her, but she had it out. Now, this Chibud, so chai, like chips, chibud, is traditional technology. It's used by lots of different groups, including macaw. Now macaw, like we saw that video earlier of halibut fishing, macaw is really concerned about halibut populations and how to maintain them. And so, both the non-native and the native people involved in their natural resource department, kept hearing, well, what about traditional halibut hooks? What about traditional halibut hooks? As both people talked about, particularly the first gentleman, that gap between around the hook dictates the size of halibut you can catch. And so, is there a way where we could have a fishing method that's really targeting fish of a certain size? And so if we want to make sure the fish are at least 30 pounds but not less than 80 pounds, can we design a hook that's going to target that and be effective and reduce bycatch? So they said, well, let's try Chibud and make a bunch of them and test it and see what happens. And that's just what they did. It's a really cool little study where they started with a traditional design. So this is different than the Haida one that we saw, where it's a single bent wood instead of more of a wedge. But the same idea of this gap here being important. So they reconstructed one from steel and bronze. Added a swivel so your line will go here. You tie your fish in here, your bait in this way. And they said, okay, well, how are we going to test the effectiveness of these? So what they decided to do is they chartered a fishing boat. These are charter fishing boats that you can go out as a sport. They chartered it for a bunch of days, and they invited a whole bunch of volunteers out. Cool gig, right? Come volunteer with us and go fishing all day for free. And what they did is they kept track of all the hooks to make sure they're the same and who was fishing them. And they randomly assigned them to different people. And they changed throughout the day which side of the boat you're on, which kind of hook you're fishing. Either the more common modern of like 2 hooks stabbed in the smelt like this, or the chibud with the fish over it like this, and then the hook sticking out. And they rotated around, like I said, to try to randomize as much as possible. A lot of folks had no fishing experience whatsoever. They just thought it would be cool to go out. Some did. And I thought this would be a good way to introduce an element of randomness and really see how these hooks do compared to what we're doing now. And one of the primary questions was around bycatch. And so when you're out jigging for halibut, you tend to catch a bunch of other things. And particularly things like canary and yellow eye rockfish that are endangered and can close down fisheries. So what they did here, what these data look like, this is the odds ratio. It's kind of funny to think about, but the bigger the odd ratio, the less likely you're going to catch it with a chibud compared to a circle hook. So what they found is things like flatfish, arrow-toothed flounder, you're less likely to catch them with a chibud compared to a circle hook, but not that much less likely. And the way they interpret it is round fish, like lingcod, rockfish, you're much less likely to catch one with a chibud compared to a circle hook. So they think it has to do with the nature of the hook and the way it's designed, which makes sense. It's designed to catch flatfish. And so other flatfish might make their way in there and get caught. But a rounder fish, we have a lingcod, which they're really kind of fat sausages, or a rockfish, it's just doesn't fit their structure right. And you're much less likely to catch those compared to the standard circle hooks. And so they made an argument that it greatly reduces bycatch, particularly about 7.5 times less likely to catch bycatch, which is pretty interesting. Which is really good because there's overlap between halibut and endangered species, and our seasons and regulations are often driven by the desire to prevent bycatch of that endangered species. bycatch meaning things you catch that you don't intend to that frequently go over the side dead. And then for halibut themselves, you can look at this histogram of the fish caught, the distribution of them caught, where circle hooks are in black and the chibut is gray. And with circle hooks, they did catch a number of larger fish. Now the chibut, they did catch one smaller fish. And they attribute that to, well, we could change the sizing of the chibut a bit and like tweak it. But in general, they tended to center more. The data were more centered, where the circle hook data are spread out more. And so they feel that with modification and further testing, the chibut could really narrow down to hit a target size. So I think this paper's legal limits 81. So from here up is legal. I think this paper is really, really cool. I'll make sure it's in the files section, because it was not easily available. I had to. What's actually cool, I wrote the authors, and so this is one of those ones where when you're searching the literature and Western doesn't have it, and you can't come across it otherwise, write the author, and I can't remember if I wrote Joe or Jonathan. I think I wrote Jonathan. He wrote me back the same day, and like I asked him, how do you pronounce this? And he's like, oh, pronounce it like this. And then we were chatting back and forth about it, and it was great. So it's a good way to open up a line of communication. And honestly, most of the stuff that we write never gets read. So if some young enthusiastic person writes us and says, hey, what you do is really cool, can you tell? I want to can I get a copy of this paper? We're generally excited to send it. So that's a bit about traditional halibut fishing. Haishika, thank you.